Alright, so the purpose of this video is to kind of just go over what I've been doing over the past few days. I'm currently planning on making a much more well-structured and better video about internet aesthetics. Um, and this is sort of part of my more broader goal of understanding internet culture. And not just understanding it, but also kind of investigating it on an empirical level. And so for the past few days, I've spent a lot of time here crafting, very tediously, a graph of internet aesthetics from the aesthetics wiki. So just to kind of go over my process here, I sort of went from the list of A to Z aesthetics here, and I just copy and pasted all of these into a list, um, and then I put them into a spreadsheet to number them or to give them IDs, and then that were that was essentially all of my nodes for the graph. And then to get the edges for the graph, I was only focusing on internet aesthetics. So to do this would have taken probably like longer than a week of my time, like probably at least like 30 hours, maybe, if not more. And I just don't really want to do that. So I only did internet aesthetics because that's sort of the source of inquiry anyway. And so I would go to the the aesthetic that I'm trying to map out the nodes for, and then I would go to the connections, and all of the connections here I would add as edges. Um, so after doing that across all 197 articles, what you essentially get, oh, here we go, is this. And there are a few interesting findings right on the surface level. I haven't done any math. I haven't looked at like paths or anything like that. I've simply just looked at the finished graph, and there are a few things that seem to jump out at me. And maybe I'm projecting my own biases here, but this is very interesting for me. The two nodes of highest degree seem to be Vaporwave and Cottagecore. And as you can see here, basically the node is bigger according to its degree, which I can show here. Basically, the minimum size for a uh, for a node is 50 pixels, and the maximum is 250 pixels. So Vaporwave here is the biggest node because it has the most uh, connections, or I guess you would say the most amount of neighbors. Um, so you have Vaporwave, which has all of these other aesthetics that connect to it, including all of its subgenres, and you have Cottagecore. Now, what is also uh, must be noted here is that the distance between nodes, to some degree, also reflects its uh, relation to other aesthetics, right? So, for instance, the reason why Cottagecore is all the way over here is because there isn't really that many nodes connecting Cottagecore to Vaporwave, right? Despite the fact that they are both like distinctly um, highly connected nodes in the entire network, they're not that similar, and so they're further away. That's important to understand because when we actually look at the totality of the network, what we can kind of extract from this is that there's almost two distinct aesthetic languages that the internet uses, at least from the source of the aesthetics wiki, which is kind of the database that I'm drawing all of this data from. So we have to also take that into account, is the fact that all of this data is coming from the aesthetics wiki, which might have aesthetics that aren't actually all that useful to put down. Might not actually even be popular at all. Might be hyper concretized. Things like mushroom core, for instance. I think that's over here somewhere. Mushroom core, yeah, mushroom core. That's literally about fucking mushrooms. So there's really not much that you could say about mushroom core. Um, but there's, and it's also, it depends on how many Westerners there are. This doesn't take into account the aesthetics of maybe more a more Eastern culture or something like that. So, we this is just this is really a small map of a huge, of much larger phenomena maybe. However, okay, now with all the prefaces out of the way, okay, when we look at this graph, we can make some interesting insights. Part uh, uh, a much larger, I would say maybe like meme maybe of the internet has always been the dichotomy between 4chan and Tumblr, and they kind of represented two categories of politics. But in this graph, you can also see that they kind of represent two categories of aesthetics as well. Um, so specifically, I would say anything below Vaporwave, maybe more specifically below Silicon Dreams, you start to get into more. You could even maybe even you could maybe even say masculine aesthetics, but I would say they aren't necessarily distinctly masculine. Whereas if you were to go to Cottagecore, a lot of these are very distinctly feminine. So um, another thing that you can notice is that when you go on this uh, part of the uh, the network here, what you notice is that all of these aesthetics sort of reference things that aren't inherently online, but they're internet aesthetics. They exist online, but they're not self-referential, right? So cottagecore, for instance, is literally about like nature and everything like that. All of the aesthetics that relate to cottagecore sort of have motifs and values and visual languages that are about nature, or they're about feminine gender roles. Whereas if you were to come down here to say like webcore, vaporwave, sort of all excuse me, all of these aesthetics down here, they are self-referential because they exist on the internet and they also refer to the internet. They're aestheticizing the thing that they exist on. So uh, what is interesting about this is the fact that there is these all sort of existed on Tumblr. All of these aesthetics. These are all aesthetics that I would say like maybe Pinterest, Tumblr, right? And then down here you get to, I would say, very like Instagram or 4chan specifically. And I know this because I run an art account that's very I would say ex-spiritualism based. That's the art account that I make, or I make art kind of around that aesthetic. Um, and Instagram and 4chan are kind of notoriously, um, I wouldn't say alt-right. 4chan kind of gets that reputation from just the poll board. But there are many other boards where there are very left-leaning people. But I would say that 4chan is, because of its nature to be anonymous, um, the 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 pressure to uh, conform to an identity politic is non-existent. So people under those conditions, I think, tend to be a lot more maybe critical or less conformist to the overarching sort of communal consensus. So um, whereas that seems to not be the case on places like Tumblr, because your blog is in some sense a direct expression of your identity. So I would say that uh, this on the opposite, this network expresses a spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum you have what I would say is probably closer to femininity, and also Tumblr, and is also not very self-referential. Whereas on this side, um, on the extreme end, you have something that I wouldn't necessarily call distinctly masculine, but I would say is self-referential in that it exists on the internet, and it also refers to and expresses uh, motifs and values in relation to the internet. So everything in between, however, is a little bit more ambiguous. Um, so yeah, that's kind of just the direct sort of analysis that I have immediately. but I plan on getting a little bit deeper into this and maybe trying to express this numerically uh, or quantify it in some way. But yeah,